Episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. Very, very much appreciated. Apologies if I sound a little bit croaky, but just getting over a bit of a cold. Hopefully that won't impair one's nasal passages. It's a good job I didn't do this episode of the show a few days ago because I couldn't smell a thing, which is not a lot of use really, is it? But anyway, so yes, last week's episode show, thank you for commenting. Yeah, it was a good episode, I enjoyed it. So we're moving on to this week. Now, as you recall, I did an episode of the show a couple of weeks ago on blended whiskies because we're all skint at the moment. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the size of my credit card statement after Christmas. Probably similar to yours, I think. So on the show I had a blended whisky that was created by the Eden Mill distillery, and I mentioned that the distillery had kindly sent me some samples of the rest of their range, which I had every good intention of using in an episode of the show, and et voila, I thought I may as well use them now, why not? Only trouble was that there's only 3 of them, so I thought, what am I going to taste it with? You know, three samples do not make an episode of the show, as they say. So I had a rummage around and realised that back in summer of last year I actually picked up a tri-pack of whisky from the Dartmoor Whisky distillery. Now, I'm assuming it's called the Dartmoor Whisky Distillery. I don't actually know. I know it's labelled as Dartmoor Whisky. I don't know if the actual distillery is called Dartmoor Whisky Distillery. I don't know. It's a bit like sort of the English. The English is a brand name for the whisky produced at the St George's Distillery in East Harling, but they don't actually tend to put St George's Distillery prominently, shall we say, on the label. So I don't know. Probably should have looked that one up. It was a bit of an omission, shall we say. But anyway, so I picked up. The distillery never sent me the samples. I picked up a tri-pack just out of pure curiosity because I'd never heard of them, and I thought it would just be an ideal distillery to take a look at. So the distillery itself, I believe, started production in 2017, so relatively young, but the sort of idea, shall we say, as per so many of these distilleries, started with a group of mates in a pub, possibly the Port Charlotte Hotel, because apparently they were up on Isla working at Bruichladdich. When I say working, I imagine they were probably taking part in the Bruichladdich Whisky School, I would imagine, which you may well recall. On several occasions, I may well have mentioned that back in 2003 I was invited to trial the whole concept of a whisky school at Bruichladdich. It was a bit sort of random at the time, and probably I don't know exactly how much help I was in with regards to that, but anyway, that's by the by. So one assumes that these guys, including a chap called Greg Miller and possibly another chap called Simon Crowe, were working up there tasting the whisky, and as you do, they said, well, why have we not got any whisky distilleries in Dartmoor? Ooh, we better build one. As you do. So one assumes that sort of one of these guys was the sort of the guy that sort of got the money together. One imagines the money man, as they say. Think it might well have been this Simon Crowe chap, but I could be wrong. But anyway, so back in 2009, they thought, yeah, it'd be a great idea to start a whisky distillery in Devon, and you know, building whisky distilleries ain't a cheap thing, so it probably took them several years to get the funding all in place. But when they did, they did things slightly differently, shall we say. Talking of the stills, for some reason, and I have no idea why, they decided to opt for a Charentaise still, which they picked up in the Cognac region of France, obviously. Apparently it came from master distiller Miguel d'Anjou, who was a 3rd generation distiller in Cognac. The still was apparently commissioned by his grandfather in 1966, but when the property decided to increase the size of their stills. In 1994, this one was decommissioned and just kind of probably left to sit in the corner, I imagine, because apparently it was in a pretty manky condition when they got hold of it, but scrubbed up all right, as they say, and was duly installed in the distillery. Now, the distillery itself is located in a Grade 2 listed building based in Bovey Tracy Town Hall, apparently. Don't know the building, I must admit I've never been there, and apparently this was built in 1866 and has been all sorts of things, including a cinema, a fire station, and was most recently home to the town council, who decided to move to another location, and thus the building probably stood empty for a while, so they were probably quite happy to have it being reused. So they set up the distillery. They've been going obviously now for a few years, and one more interesting thing to note, that the distilling itself and the creation of the spirit was overseen by one Frank McHardy, who you'll probably remember from his days at Springbank. I believe Frank sort of retired and kind of dabbles now with helping out distilleries getting off the ground, and a bit of a Dr. Jim Swan kind of thing, I imagine. I did meet Frank on one occasion. We just popped into the shop, you know, just completely random, you know. Sort of Frank McHardy wanders into a sort of whiskey shop in Nottingham, sort of a million miles away from Scotland. Seemed like a lovely chap. We had a chat, can't remember what we talked about, but, you know, like I said, seemed like a very knowledgeable guy. So, guess this is kind of what you call doing things the right way, getting somebody involved from the beginning that, shall we say, knows a little bit about distilling whiskey, and, you know, obviously teaching the crew how to sort of create the best whiskey from the still and the raw materials that they have. So be interesting to see what they come up with. I believe they age in 3 different types of cask: ex-American oak, ex-cognac cask, ex-American oak, ex-Oloroso casks, and ex-Bourbon wine, Bordeaux wine cask. So yeah, should be interesting, and they release each as an individual, so I shall be looking forward to tasting them. Eden Mill, on the other hand, it's a slightly older distillery, began production in 2014, so obviously this year will be its 10th anniversary. Wow, where does the time go? The history, certainly of the location, again, I suppose a bit like sort of Dartmoor, does predate the actual distillery itself, and apparently that on the history dates back to 1810, when John Haig of the very famous Haig family built a whisky distillery in Guardbridge in Fife. The distillery itself remained open until 1860, when they decided that they were obviously going to focus more on the Cameron Brigg distillery, and sold the distillery in Fife to another company that reopened it as a paper mill, apparently, called the Guardbridge Paper Mill. Apparently in the 1950s, at its height, it was employing some 600 people. When it was closed several years later, that number had shrunk to 180, apparently. So, yes, I believe that the distillery, or the paper mill itself, was closed in 1967, and then the site was purchased by St Andrew's Distillery, who were looking at sort of creating a biomass facility there. So one imagines it's a pretty big site, but fast forward to 2012, and a chap called Paul Miller, who was apparently the former sales director for Molson Coors, also had spent some time with Diageo, I believe, set up a brewery on the site, which eventually turned into a distillery where they started making gin, as you remember, or we may well recall that certainly Eden Mill became well known for their range of gins before launching their whiskey, and apparently, according to the blurb that I read, is the site, or the Eden Mill Distillery, was the first combined brewery distillery to be set up in Scotland. So really looking forward to tasting their whiskey. As you know, there's been a big resurgence in interest in distilling in the Lowlands, and I've been a huge fan. I think the Lowlands have been overlooked for the building of distilleries for so long, and for many years all we had was obviously well, I would say the big three, but it's really nice to see a load of new distilleries cropping up, and it'll be interesting to see what style they've chosen for their spirit. As you know, you have Lindors, Locklear that have gone down very much down the estery, fruity, very approachable early on style of whiskey. Then you have kind of distilleries like Annandale that are kind of making a spirit that's more akin to say Bladnoch, so what I would consider more old school Lowland. So it's going to be really interesting to see where Edenbridge kind of fits into this kind of pantheon of new Lowland distilleries. So anyway, I think that's enough waffling. I think it's just time to take a look at today's lot. Right, okay, so I have kind of mixed them up a little bit because I've tried to sort of, you'll understand when I sort of run through them. So we're going to kick off firstly with the Eden Mill Ex-Bourbon Cask Single Malt, bottled at 46%. Then we're going to move on to the Ex-Bourbon Cask Dartmoor Whisky. See, there's some sort of method to my madness. This is also bottled at 46%. It's going to be interesting to see how the styles differ. Certainly completely different stills. I mean, whiskey made on a Charente still, that's going to be interesting. I mean, even if it's not very good, it's still a really good selling point, it has to be said. The next bottling we're going to move on to is another one of the Dartmoor whisky. So this is the Ex-Bordeaux cask, so 100% Bordeaux cask matured. Don't know for how long. Hopefully when I taste it, that will kind of give us an indication of the age of the spirit. Then the fourth sample we'll be looking at is back to Eden Mill. So this is the Eden Mill Sherry Cask Single Malt, bottled at 46%. It's aged 50-50 in Ex-Miguel Martin Oloroso and PX casks. So be interesting to see whether any distillery character survives that or not. The penultimate bottling is back to Dartmoor, and this is the Dartmoor Ex-Oloroso cask, so 100% Oloroso cask. Interesting. Similar-ish, slightly darker, I would say, the Eden Mill to the Dartmoor, so that should be an interesting thing to check out. And the final bottling, unfortunately, is not, well, it is peated, it's actually lightly peated. So we're on to the Eden Mill's 2003 Art of St Andrews Single Malt, bottled at 46.5%. This is kind of like their top of their range, I suppose, for want of a better word. It's a lightly peated spirit aged in a combination of Ex-Bordeaux, Oloroso and PX, and then all vatted together, one imagines, and then finished in ex-cognac casks. Good God. It's a kind of, I sort of looked at it, when I sort of got sent the sample and looked at, obviously, how they'd matured it, and just Cavalan just popped straight into my mind. On paper, it probably shouldn't work. There's too many different cask types, but as you know, with Cavalan, certainly their entry-level Distillers Select, I think, bottling, I forget now, just works. I mean, really amazingly complex with all the characteristics of all the different casks and some spirit character. So high hopes for that particular bottling. Will it be a case of, it's very Cavalan-esque and comes across with that complexity, or will it just be all oak? Anyway, we'll find out when we get to the end, I suppose. So not a lot else to say apart from let's kick off with a bit of Ex-Bourbon Cask Eden Mill then, shall we? Right, okay, so this is the Eden Mill Bourbon Cask. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Quite young. I would guess probably no older than about 5-ish, I would say. It's got that sort of natural cereally kind of character, a little bit of Turkish delight, rose Turkish delight, white fruit, grass, citrus. It's got a lovely minerality. I mean, they say that it's kind of a lowland crossed with a highland, and in style, or the distillery claim that that's the style of the spirit, and yeah, I can see why they say that. It does have that really intense, almost granity, sort of Highland minerally character, and it's more sort of an old school style of lowland, that cereal led characteristic, which again I often find synonymous with things like Bladnoch, Annandale and what have you. So we're more towards old school lowland, which is cool. Yeah, it's a bit young. Like I said, there's that sort of rose petally note, but there's a little bit of oak, not a huge amount. Again, the oak is very, very subtle, and this is all about the distillate, all about the spirit character. And it's got loads of character, it really has. I think this is an absolutely lovely spirit. I think this is going to be intriguing to see how this carries on maturing. Maybe they will release a 10-year-old, who knows? Will that 10-year-old have maybe a little bit more oak character? Will it be sort of, so as overt spirit character? Anyway, let's see what the pass on. That's got a lovely progression. So it kicks off with all that sort of cereal character again, little rose Turkish delight, minerals, barley, more cereal, and then right towards the end, in comes that vanilla oak, that sort of slight toffee oak, a little bit of spice coming with it. It's actually got quite a nice fleshiness again, does have that sort of old school lowland character, the cereal led character, with a little bit of fleshy fruit, a little bit of almost kind of banana skin, certainly on the mid palate leading into the finish. Yeah, I like that. That's really impressive. Spices right on the aftertaste have a slight chocolatiness, which I think is really quite appealing. I think that is a gorgeous whiskey, absolutely lovely. Loads and loads of character, not too much oak, pretty much spirit orientated. So yeah, that floats my boat. Okay, so let's move on to the Dartmoor whisky. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Different beastie altogether. A lot more congeners, a lot more impurities, which is what I would expect from a cognac still. I mean, although yes, it has the big fat, turban on the top, for want of a better word. I don't, but the trouble is thinner tubes and all that kind of stuff. A lot less copper contact, thus a lot more characterful spirit. And it you know what this kind of reminds me of? Langerton. Not quite as intensely Provençal and herbal as Langerton, but there is that Langerton-y kind of herbal, botanical, almost kind of juniper-y sort of character. Again, not a huge amount of oak, bit of pepper, little bit of vanilla, little bit of estery white fruit underneath, scrubby, lemony. Again, lots and lots of character. I mean, very distillate led, not a huge amount of oak, lovely balance, just enough oak. Yeah, that is a really intriguing spirit. I mean, it's not the style that everybody's going to love, it has to be said, and I have no idea what a full bottle actually retails for, but I mean, if this is around about the 40 quidish mark, 40-45 pounds sort of mark, then yeah. See what the pound's like. Yeah, that's nice. Again, lots of character. Bit young, but not too young. Lovely spiciness on the finish. A real peppery kind of spice dancing on the tongue. Again, herbal, botanical, in that Langerton-y kind of sort of style. White fruits, a little bit of apricot. maybe not quite as complex as the Eden Mill. Don't think it's as old as the Eden Mill. I wouldn't be surprised if this is somewhere between 3 and 5. Well, obviously it can't be older than 5, can it? They sort of started distilling in 2017. Oh yes, it can be actually. Duh. Maths is not my strong point at this time of the morning. So yeah, it's good. It's interesting. It's again not overly oaked. It's distillate forward. Really interesting. You get all the character of the distillery, which is just what floats my boat. It's what I want. I want to know what your whiskey is all about. I don't want too much oak, and you could argue that the oak is maybe could do with a little bit more, possibly. But you know what? On the whole, again, a very impressive spirit. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Dartmoor Ex-Bordeaux cask. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Yep. Again, nicely balanced. I can get that sort of herbally, junipery, kind of scrubby kind of distillery character. A little bit of chocolate powder, red fruits. It feels a smidge younger than the Ex-Bourbon cask. There's a little bit of a rawness there. I personally would have left this a little bit longer in the cask myself, but again, interesting, well balanced. Get the distillery character, not too much oak. Let's see what that's like. Like the nose, quite well balanced. Kicks off with a little bit more of the sort of winey red fruits, but again I get that sort of herbal junipery distillery character coming through in spades. It's a bit on the short side, it's a bit young, a little raw on the aftertaste. There's some lovely kind of nascent oily banana and apricot. Overall, I think that's really intriguing. It's an interesting whiskey. It's really well balanced. Personally, I think it was bottled a little too soon. I would have liked to have seen that with maybe an extra year or two in the cask, just to kind of round off that slight rawness. I mean, it was not sort of an unpleasant rawness. It was kind of a natural rawness, it has to be said. But I just think, yeah, maybe a couple more years. But then again, would that have kind of like sort of increased the intensity and character of the oak at the expense of the character of the spirit? Possibly. I'm sure the distillery have got sort of casks that they are maturing for a little while longer, and maybe we will indeed find out in due course. Who knows? But I think on the whole, again, not a bad whiskey. Right, okay, so let's move on to the first of the two sherried monsters. Oops, did I say sherry monsters? Sherry matured whiskies. Oops. Anyway, let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Yeah, it is a sherry monster. It's kind of intense beeswax, oily sort of Oloroso fruit, treacle, citrus peel, lanolin. I don't get any spirit character. It is just sherry. Now, I know there are people that love sherry monsters. I mean, there are people who love Macallan, for example. But for me, the interest has kind of dissipated quite considerably because the balance is now too far shifted into the sherry spectrum. Now, if it was me, I would have sherry finished this possibly. If you need a sherried whiskey in your portfolio, which I guess as a distillery you do, I would have opted for the finish rather than the maturing in 100% sherry. Because, like I said, I'm not getting any of that lovely character from the Ex-Bourbon cask whatsoever. Very clean though, no sulphur, no impurities, no off notes. So that's a plus, I suppose. Let's see what that's like. It's soft. It's very treacly. It's got it's got the minerality. All right. So yes, all right. You can argue there is a bit of distillery character there, i.e., the minerality, which kind of stops it becoming all sweet and soft and flabby. So it kind of gives it a verve, I suppose. There's a little bit of spice, a little bit of sort of almost burnt raisin. It's a little bit on the short side. The tannins kind of are sort of like shortening the. I mean, I couldn't even tell you whether the spirit is older or younger than the Ex-Bourbon, because I really can't taste a great deal of spirit, as to be said. It's all about the sherry. And like I said, although I get some minerality coming through, it's just really not floating my boat whatsoever. Okay, so let's move on to the Dartmoor Ex-Oloroso cask. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Oh, Jesus Christ. A bit of a sulphur overload there, as to be said. I mean, I know I had a bit of a sort of sort of easy detection of sulphur, unfortunately, and there's probably, I'm just getting, God almighty, I'm just getting so much bloody sulphur. It's possible that it's spirit sulphur. It's very young, it's very raw. It's a lot of edgy sort of Oloroso. It's dried plums, raisins, prune, that kind of thing. No distillery character whatsoever at all, and just this overt sulphur note. It's possibly it's a combination of sulphur from the cask and the spirit, maybe, but it is just, I mean, it's settling down a little bit, but it is rough as hell, it has to be said, really. Not a great bottling at all, and really, really disappointing. I mean, considering, you know, who was supposedly behind this. So it's maybe I'm being unduly harsh, but you know, it's just you know, like sticking a drawing pin in your ass, basically. Yeah, that's what the balance like. Okay, so the sulphur blemish is not quite so noticeable on the palate. It's got a nice kind of chocolatiness, chocolate-coated raisins, coffee, a little bit of prune possibly, sort of, yeah. Again, it's all very, very sherried. Touch of treacle as well, a bit short, young, raw. I mean, again, it's not floating my boat, you know. And as you well know, you know, it's going to take something pretty impressive, you know, for 100% sherry matured malt to sort of get me going, because these really just don't at all. Neither of them are particularly great, in my personal opinion. The ex-American oak bottlings, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, these ones, well, you know, let's just kind of forget about them. Éclater la terre, tout part en poussière. Right, okay, so on to the final whiskey of the afternoon. So this is the Eden Mill 2003 Art of St Andrews bottling. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Ooh. I think Cavalan is just sort of like an apt descriptor. I get the smoky, slightly earthy peat. I get a little bit of coastal notes, some brine, cereal, honey, a little bit of seaweed, a little bit of dried Oloroso fruit, some barley, citrus, dried apple from the cognac casks. Oh, mother, that's damn good. Now, it ain't cheap, it has to be said, and I'm not going to tell you the price, because basically I'll get so many comments saying, how much for a young whiskey? You know, sometimes you just have to go, that's damn good. I mean, that really is good. I'm getting the distillery character, I'm getting the individual cask notes. It just has a wonderful complexity, and like I said, you know, it just reminds me of Cavalan in the fact that it is just so wonderfully balanced, and you look at the thing on paper and you think that should not work, and yet here it is. It really does work, and it has to be said that, you know, this is just a testament to the blender at Eden Mill. I mean, you know, it's just beautifully balanced. You know, it could have so easily gone over into a complete woody mess, but no, that's stunning, absolutely stunning. And you know, to me, it doesn't matter how old your whiskey is. It's all about the complexity, the characteristics, and it just has it in absolute spades. Let's do a pass on. That finish is lovely. So it kind of kicks off with a little bit more of the Bourbon-y oak, a little bit more of the American oak, creamy American oak, before moving into a stringent peat, a little bit of salt, heather, minerals, touch of honey. The cognac-y kind of dried apple-y kind of fruit comes through on the mid palate, and we're finishing with lovely pepperiness, a little bit of treacle, a little bit of apricot. It kind of, wow, I mean, that is stunningly good. And a little bit of dried fruit on the aftertaste, with a little bit of ashy peat and earth. I mean, that's just amazingly complex. And like I said, it doesn't really matter how old or whatever your spirit is. It's all about, does it have complexity? Does it have interest? And by God, that has both. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Well, firstly, a big thank you to the guys at Eden Mill for the samples for today's episode of the show. Obviously, the Dartmoor Whisky samples I kind of picked up myself, but yeah, I hope you think it's been a sort of an informative episode. I hope you think that the review has been fair, because I think, you know, the ex-American oak or ex-Bourbon cask Eden Mill was just absolutely stunning. Lovely, lovely whiskey. Showcases exactly the characteristics of the spirit. Tells you what they're trying to achieve, where they're kind of sitting in the overall kind of pantheon of lowland distilleries. Not too much oak, very, very much distillate driven. Loved the ex-Bourbon cask Dartmoor whisky. I mean, it just tells you everything you want to know about what the distillery is trying to do. The fact that the distillery uses this ex-Charentais cognac cask still, and you know, it's a bit quirky, it's a bit different, it's a bit, yeah, I like it. Lovely, brilliant. That's what I want to see. The two sherry casks, well, that's not what I want to see. I know that there are people out there that love that style of whiskey, and from a commercial point of view, I can understand why distilleries make them. But for me, they're just too much sherry. There's no balance there whatsoever. It's all about the cask. And with regards to the Dartmoor, you know, that's you know. No, that was not a great one. It has to be said. I mean, there is this kind of argument that's been, I suppose, to a certain extent, attributed to the fact that, you know, distilleries do fill their miniatures with less than perfect quality spirit, which I think does them no favours whatsoever, because the amount of people that will encounter your whiskey through buying a miniature because they don't want to sort of buy an entire bottle of an unknown product. They'll quite happily buy a sort of like a miniature tri-pack or the odd miniature or something like that, just to try them out. And then you bottle sort of like your not so great spirit in it. It doesn't really do you any favours at all. So, but even it is what it is. And the sort of Art St Andrews bottling, I mean, stunning, absolutely lovely whiskey. Another one, like I said, like Cavalan, another one of those whiskies that you look at it on paper and you think all those cask types shouldn't actually work, but when you taste it you realise that it does work. And that is just, like I said, a real testament to whoever put that particular blend together that they just got the balance absolutely spot on. And having sort of blended spirits myself, I know that it is not an easy job, at all. And at the end of the day, you can only sort of do your best. So and I think sort of if it was Mr. Miller that put that one together, then bloody hats off to you, mate. You've done an amazing job. If not, it's whoever your blender is has done an amazing job. So yeah, there you go. That's this week's episode of The Show in the Bag. I think it's been really intriguing and really interesting. As I say, I love to bring these kind of new products, new distilleries, kind of, and highlight them to you kind of guys. And hopefully you'll basically, if the whiskies are available in your market, you'll pick up a bottle and hopefully give them a go. Because I think certainly the Ex-Bourbon cask bottlings of both distilleries are just very, very good bottlings. So anyway, that's this week's episode of The Show in the Bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. All that's left to say is good afternoon and good ramming.